A young gentleman. With a bit of luck, the television's going to work now.
Go all the way.
I know some of the young boys have to go off. When you do go off, please leave silently. We've got today a lecture, video, I don't know what you want to call it, seminar on the problem of cults and missionaries. I think there is as Les will explain later on, a misperception within the community that that problem doesn't exist here in South Africa. Not only does it exist in South Africa, it actually exists here in Johannesburg. Now, Alan was just telling me yesterday that the bar mitzvah, there was someone here from the Rena Church. I think he got a bit of a shock when he saw my alien poster out there. I don't think he took too kindly to it. But the point is, he's a Jewish person and he's involved in the Rena Church, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people like that here. I don't need to say any more. This is Mr. Les Glassman.
Doctor.
And Dr. Les Glassman. If you have any troubles with your teeth, you know where to go. And he'll do the rest of the talking. He's brought a team, he's brought a video. Please pay attention. And I hope you enjoy and find it revealing. Okay. Shh.
On the outset, I'd like to thank Rabbi Shushad and Rabbi Bella, the Sandton Commission, the Sandton Shul, for giving us the opportunity to speak to you this morning. I was once the youth director here many years ago, and Sandton has a very special place for me. In our days, many of the shuls were actually anti-youth, and Sandton was one of the first shuls that actually put all the efforts into the youth. And we can see what's happened and how it's flourished, the shul. Okay, the topic of the talk is why Jews shouldn't get involved in Jews for Jesus. On the outset, I'd like to say that in no ways is this talk meant to degrade or bring down Christianity at all. Our aim has never been to convert non-Jews to Christianity, and throughout the centuries that's never been our aim, and that isn't our aim. So what we're speaking today, it's got nothing to do with defaming Christianity or bringing it down in any way. All what we're interested is in trying to keep Jews Jewish. And I must thank you all for coming this morning on a cold Sunday morning and sitting here, and I hope it will be worth your while. Why are we actually having this talk today, this morning? According to a Christian magazine, Christina, in 1987, they quote that in the United States of America, this is in 87, there are more than 100,000 Jews for Jesus. 100,000 in the United States alone. Rabbi Moti Berger from Asher Torah mentions that there are more Jews involved in Jews for Jesus than all the yeshiva bokrim in the world, including Israel and outside as well. According to Christian missionary sources, more Jews have converted to Christianity willingly in the last 19 years, since 1974, than in the last 19 centuries. Okay, just to give a bit of impact, that since 1974 the Beatles had already broken up. So just to imagine, in the last 19 years, more Jews have willingly converted to Christianity than in the last 1900 years. Okay. How does it affect us, and why is this happening? About 2 years ago, I was fortunate to be in the UK, in London, and a friend of mine who was once involved, we managed to get out slowly. We went to Hyde Park, we saw the missionaries there, and we went to Rabbi Akush. Rabbi Akush deals with the anti-missionary activity in the UK. We're going to start off with a video that we got from him in Birmingham, which will show you the problem in the UK. After that, we're going to have a speaker who was once slightly involved and has come out, and then we're going to show you the problem in this country. Okay, can we start with the video?
Who's got golden thing? You have to excuse the writing, it's going to remain on it. But,
and then I'd like you all to, if you've got questions, or any comments to make. We're going to have a time for questions, and I want you all to feel pretty free to interrupt at any time. I hope this It's very interesting when you just open up Reshit, when Cain killed Abel. So Chazal mentioned that we have the word damim in plural, bloods in plural. So Chazal explained that Cain didn't know how to kill him, so he poked him in many places, so all the blood started coming out. The Ramban explains profoundly what happened there. He said, the word, why we have the word damim in plural, is that it wasn't only one person that was killed, it was all the generations that were going to follow. And this is the frightening thing. When they get hold of one Jew, and they convert him, he becomes a Jew for Jesus, and marries out the faith, all his descendants are lost. Okay, how do they do it? They mentioned on the video all the special attacks that they had. So this is something that we managed to get here in this country. This is how to win the Jews. When I was at Wits, quite a few years ago, they had this on the poster boards. An experience of Messianic joy, the liberated Wailing Wall. And we went to the meeting. This is when they first came out to this country. So they had people with yarmulkes, with singing Hebrew songs in one of the halls of it. And passerbys coming through would hear Hebrew music and they'd see what's the difference. If you look at the very top, it's got Jews for Jesus, but very insignificantly. In the Star newspaper, not that long ago, it was in December the 15th, 89, they put out a full-page advertisement. Christmas would be impossible without the Jewish people. Now, what's interesting with this, if one wants to put in a little insertion, how much does it cost? So you're talking about thousands and thousands of rands that they are spending in trying to convert us. Okay, what's also interesting here is that there were no responses to this article. We wrote in and they didn't publish our letter. In the same Star, they once came out with this ad in Hebrew, targeting the Israelis living in this country. With a picture of Jesus on the cross, it says Yeshua Mashiach. Once they imported from the CNA, US News, you actually see how frightening this is. In like Time Magazine, the same advertisement was in the Time Magazine, just like Newsweek and Time. So we're just paging through, and there's an article here, sure, I'm Jewish and I celebrate Christmas. And it's from the Jews for Jesus. This one most probably is the most frightening out of all. It's called Issues, which is, I actually subscribe to the Jews for Jesus here, and they send it to me on a monthly basis. So when you open it up, there's no mention of Jesus at all. You see the matzahs, you see the becher there, and you look through, and it tells you about all the Jewish names, very glossy. And it's got here the little shtetl, and you go through and you don't even think you're reading a Jews for Jesus publication. Until at the very end they tell you that Jesus is the Messiah you're to contact. It's also interesting over here, with these three matzahs, the latest, and this is, we heard from, and you'll hear it later in the video, they're now using Jewish symbols, which are so dear to us, and they're saying that it's fine, you can remain Jewish, all you have to do is believe in Jesus. You can keep the Pesach. They said, even so, the Pesach has hidden messages about Jesus. So they explain now that the three matzahs, what did the three matzahs stand for? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. What did the 4 cups of wine stand for? They explain very simply, the 4 Gospels. So even within like very sacred things which we hold so dearly, they're trying to infiltrate, and they're succeeding, unfortunately. The question's often been asked, why do Jews get involved in it? What caused them to search? Why did they get involved? I'm reminded of a story where somebody was looking for something they had lost. They had lost some money. It was in a dark neighborhood. And somebody came up to this person and they were by the lamppost. So they saw him there and they said, what are you looking for? He said, I'm looking for my money that I lost. He said, where did you lose it? He said, around the corner. He said, well, why are you looking here by the lamppost? He said, well, here's a light. Unfortunately, and this is what we have to try and improve, they are showing them a type of life, they're showing them a type of friendship. About 2 weeks ago,
I prefer to keep my experience a personal one, because it's part of my life that I'm not exactly proud of. I was so vulnerable and naive. I was in a situation where I found myself alone, and worst of all, ignorant of my own Jewish heritage. These were to be the perfect ingredients, making the ideal bait for reborn Christians and Jews for Jesus who felt that they were doing God's work to convert unsuspecting Jews as myself. I'm originally from Harare, Zimbabwe, where I was brought up in a very loving, traditional Jewish home. We weren't kosher, yet we didn't eat forbidden foods. We didn't observe Shabbos in the strictest sense, yet we were brought up to respect it. We lit candles on Friday nights, attended shul on Shabbos and hugs. Due to the political uncertainty in Zimbabwe, something which we're experiencing now, my parents enrolled me at King David. I boarded at the hostel and completed my last 2 years of schooling there. Thereafter, I went to Johannesburg College of Education, where I hoped to qualify as a teacher. I stayed at the residence on JCE campus, which was non-Jewish in character, in which I felt very out of place. Although I enjoyed a Jewish social life outside Res, inside the residence itself, I felt very much alone. For the first time in my life, I was in a place where I didn't know a soul. I ate meals alone and attended house meetings alone. One evening, while I was sitting alone in the dining hall, I was pleasantly surprised to find 4 friendly faces surrounding me. "Hi, my name's Evian," said the tall, willowy girl, seating herself next to me. They immediately drew me into a lively conversation. From that time on, they included me in almost everything they did. I had the opportunity of meeting the rest of their group. It turned out that they were all students at Wits. They seemed so nice and down to earth, no hang-ups and no drugs. Once they had won over my trust, they invited me to a meeting which took place somewhere near Roodepoort. I was so naive because the so-called meeting was in fact a prayer meeting, which was held at a makeshift church. We sat on wooden benches and listened to the overpowering voice of the preacher. Evian sat next to me in a trance-like state. While the preacher's booming voice was heard, she rocked backwards and forwards, talking to herself. I could feel the hypnotic effect he was having on the people around me, but I remained unaffected. On the contrary, I felt awkward and uncomfortable, and couldn't wait to get back to the confines of my room. I was invited to other such meetings, but turned them down. By this stage, I was more aware of who these people were and what they were trying to achieve. However, their friendliness and concern softened my resolve, and once again I allowed them to introduce me to a member of Jews for Jesus, whose sole purpose was to stand on the steps of the great hall at Wits and quote the verses in a parrot-like fashion to outwit any Jews willing to listen. During my encounter with him, I became acutely aware of how little I knew about our own Jewish sources and how those sources were linked to the Messiah, which he kept referring to. Due to my lack of knowledge, I couldn't even challenge him. I was lost for words and totally confused. In my confusion, Evian gave me a tape recording of people who had been diagnosed as clinically dead and had come back to life and were relating their experience on this tape. Each person on the tape described the recurring images of dark tunnels, lights, dancing angels, and visions of Christ. Evian convinced me that if I embraced Christ as my Savior, I would be saved and go to heaven. If I didn't, I would suffer eternal damnation. The formula seemed so simple. Belief in Christ equals eternal life in heaven. It seemed illogical that Jews throughout the centuries should cling to such an arduous, difficult, and complicated path of worship. How could so many Jews for so long be so wrong? It didn't make sense. But then again, I wasn't caught in their web because I found their religion to be more rational or spiritual than ours. It all had to do with my fear of death, which was fueled by their visions of being eternally damned, and my own inability to use our Jewish sources to deal with it. My dearest friend, who was at Jubilee Hall, reminds me to this very day of the phone call I made to her to say, "I think I've seen the light." Their victory was short-lived, because very soon after that, I was rushed to hospital with terrible abdominal pain. Lying in hospital with my friends and family around me, away from residents, the need for their company dwindled. They became more of a nuisance and embarrassment than anything else. And it took time before they finally got the message and left me alone. From this experience began a long search for many unanswered questions, gradually drawing me away from the peripheries of Judaism, closer and closer to the heart of what our Jewish heritage is all about.
Okay, who's in charge of the video?
I had the name in Google.
That we actually showed this video. What happened was, you'll see it on the actual video to verify, I was actually given this pamphlet and it's got the name of the person who gave it. So I actually phoned her and I started off by changing my voice. I didn't want to make it too obvious. And the things that she said to me over the phone are actually very frightening. We've got it on the video. And then we actually will show it. I invited her over to my place. She came over twice. We became quite friendly. And the frightening things, you'll see how friendly she actually is, but how very dangerous it is. So the video was actually made with her permission. But any volunteers who wants to read it out aloud?
Yeah, that would be an idea.
Can I read the Wikipedia? Now you know who I really The people replied, "Who would have believed what we now report? Who could have seen the Lord's hand in this? It was the will of the Lord that his servant should grow like a plant taking root in dry ground. He had no dignity or beauty to make us take notice of him. There was nothing attractive about him, nothing that would draw us to him. We despised him and rejected him. He endured suffering and pain. No one would even look at him. We ignored him as if he were nothing. But he endured the suffering that should have been ours, the pain that we should have borne. All the while we thought that his suffering was punishment sent by God. But because of our sins he was wounded, beaten because of the evil we did. We are healed by the punishment he suffered, made whole by the blows he received. All of us were like sheep that were lost, each of us going his own way. But the Lord made the punishment fall on him, the punishment all of us deserved. He was treated harshly, but endured it humbly. He never said a word. Like a lamb about to be slaughtered, like a sheep about to be sheared, he never said a word. He was arrested and sentenced and led off to die, and no one cared about his fate. He was put to death for the sins of our people. He was placed in a grave with evil men. He was buried with the rich, even though he had never committed a crime or ever told a lie. The Lord says, "It was my will that he should suffer. His death was a sacrifice to bring forgiveness. And so he will see his descendants. He will live a long life, and through him my purpose will succeed. After a life of suffering, he will again have joy. He will know that he did not suffer in vain. My devoted servant with whom I am pleased will bear the punishment of many, and for his sake I will forgive them. And so I will give him a place of honor, a place among great and powerful men. He willingly gave his life and shared the fate of evil men. He took the place of many sinners and prayed that they might be forgiven. And now you know the truth, my friends.
Okay, if I had to ask you, where does this come from? Okay, have we got any offers? Where do you think this comes from? Do you think it's from the Jewish Bible or the Christian Bible? Those who think it's from the Jewish Bible, put up your hands. Those who think it's from a Christian Bible, put up your hands. Just to tell you how heavy this is, I was walking back from Shul this Shabbos, and in Yabel some colored chaps came and they were singing Hallelujah. When guys saw me with the yarmulke, he said Isaiah 53. That's your answer. Isaiah 53. Now, here's the good news. The magazine with the message, special Rabbi's edition, which was brought out from John During. It's from PO Box, I think the PO Box might say change, but it's 7848 Johannesburg, South Africa. In this, every single rabbi tells his testimony, so-called rabbis, who converted to Christianity, and everyone, it's unbelievable, tells that they read Isaiah 53 and they saw the light. It's hard to recognize the Messiah. Every single tract you'll ever receive, you'll always see Isaiah 53. And here's what about the New Covenant with Hebrew writing, also with Isaiah 53. And so talking about Isaiah 53, in London where you saw it, they go around, Jews for Jesus there, and they got rugby jerseys at the back saying Isaiah 53. I was once at a meeting, it was many years ago at the Berea Tabernacle, where they brought out David Brickner. He was the head of the Chicago branch of Jews for Jesus. And they were speaking, and it was basically on our Bible, which refers to passages which so-called refer to Jesus, and Isaiah 53 was the highlight. At the end of the talk, we were there and we were discussing with those we thought were Jews, trying to bring them back. Somebody said, well, Isaiah 53 can only be speaking about the Messiah. Now, when you deal with the missionaries, you have to be exceptionally careful, because if they've got a bit of cockney, they're a little clever, they will know that in Sanhedrin, in Talmud Sanhedrin, it actually speaks about who is Isaiah 53 speaking about. We know in Isaiah 49 verse 3, it says that my servant Israel. So there's just a few verses before it says my servant Israel. And if you look at it in its context, it's very easily speaking about the nation of Israel. We're the ones who've suffered. We're the ones who've really gone through all the pain and suffering and pogroms and impositions. Even more, we can look at our prophets. If one wants to insist that it's speaking about a person, look at Isaiah himself. He's put to death. Look at all our prophets and how they suffered. But the only way, the way that we find of which we're successful when we deal with Jews who do get involved, we actually turn it around. There's once a girl who came from Rima Church. She was selling books in the bookshop there. Very involved. She came in with a big crush. She came to our place. And we asked her, how did she get involved? She said, they showed me Isaiah 53 and I saw the light. So we went through Isaiah 53. We actually went through which we read now. And we started saying, well, let's see if it actually is speaking about Jesus. And the way to do it, okay, but you have to be, you only approach missionaries or you only approach the Jews for Jesus when you've had quite a bit of training and you've read a lot. Otherwise, say, like Rabbi Akash said, thank you, but no thank you, and you walk home. But if one does want to get more involved, it's not difficult. You know the word emet, you know the Hebrew word emet, aleph, mem, tav. So aleph's from the very, what's the aleph from? It's the beginning of the alphabet, the mem's from the middle and the tav's from the end. And it stands on a tripod, it's very secure. The truth is always there. And the Torah is the truth without any doubt. So if we look at Isaiah 53, the way that we've used it, we've actually used it to our advantage when we deal with these people. So we say, fine, let's look in the New Testament. Let's look, Taki, if Jesus was the Messiah, if we tell them from our sources what the Messiah is supposed to do, we all know. And Raymond's going to speak a bit later on what the Mashiach actually is and what the Mashiach is supposed to do. But the way of getting to them is when we actually speak New Testament. And it's not difficult at all. So, if we look through Isaiah very quickly, it says that he opened not his mouth. You go through the New Testament in the Gospels, unbelievable. When Jesus appeared before the Sanhedrin, he opened his mouth. When he appeared before Pontius Pilate, he opened his mouth. When he was on the cross, in Matthew said he shouted with a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. which is a bit of Aramaic. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? So that doesn't really fit in. He actually did open his mouth. It says that he shouted with a loud voice. More important, it says that he went like a lamb to the slaughter. He did no violence. And this, when you actually speak to Jews who are getting involved, it's very, very powerful. Did Jesus actually, was he the man of peace? Was he the man of like the lamb that went to the slaughter without doing any violence? When you read the Gospels, the very first Gospel is the Gospel of Matthew. It's in Matthew 10:34, Jesus makes the most amazing statement. And it's in the New Testament. You can open any Bible. He says, I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to turn a father against the son, a mother against the daughter. If you love your parents more than me, they're not worthy of me. Furthermore, when you read a bit more in the Gospel, the disciples came to Jesus and they said, we have no swords. The Romans are coming and we have no swords. Jesus said, sell your garments and buy the swords. This is in the New Testament. And what did they do with the swords? It says further on, it's unbelievable. They took the sword and they cut off the ear of one of the Romans. But Jesus himself, he went into the temple and he took out a whip and he started smashing things down. He cursed a fig tree. All the answers are basically in the New Testament as well. It's using it from the reverse side. But the most striking thing which we found and which we use, which is, and this is actually the turnabout, we actually take them and we show them the book of Luke. In the book of Luke, Jesus said there, bring my enemy.
Hi everybody, because it's running late, I'm just going to speak for a few minutes. I'm not going to go into the sources that I'm supposed to give, but just to put my remarks in context, Christians try to make us believe that the main difference between us and them is the belief in whether or not Jesus was the Messiah. And it's really not the main difference, okay? There are two other differences which are much more fundamental. The first is that they believe that a man could be God, or God could be a man, which we say is other gods are as worshipping a false God. And the other difference is that they say we don't have to keep the mitzvot, the Torah and mitzvot, and we say we do. The third difference around. Okay, we answer firstly, as Leslie said, nowhere do we find any theory in our sources of the second coming. Okay, and the Christians can't prove it either. Some of the rabbis that deal with this say that the actual doctrine of the second coming, the fact that Christianity developed that doctrine, is in itself an admission of failure. Okay, the fact that Jesus didn't fulfill the messianic prophecies caused him to develop that doctrine. Okay, he didn't, but next time round he will. Okay, so it's actually a very weak point of theirs, and it's almost impossible for him to answer this. The only prophecies that they try to show us that he did fulfill are those prophecies which are not unique to the Messiah. For example, that Isaiah 53, that they believe that the Messiah is going to suffer. They say, well, Jesus suffered, so is the Messiah. But obviously we can say, well, there are millions of people that have suffered. And there are a few others like that as well. They believe that, we also believe this prophecy that the Messiah will ride into Jerusalem on a donkey. So they say, look, he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. So the person, okay, but obviously for all the things we say, he might have done that, he might not have done that, but whether or not he did it, there were tens of thousands of others who did it. So that in itself is not a proof. Okay? And that's all I'm really going to say now because we're getting late. But I just want to say one other thing. Whether or not one believes that Jesus was the Messiah, that is not going to be the break between Judaism and not. So everyone knows the history of Christianity. Jesus was a Jew and so were his first disciples and so was Paul, his main apostle. And they all believed Jesus was the Messiah. And nevertheless, they were Jews, they were part of the Jewish religion, it was a sect of the Jewish religion, and there were many sects in those times. And because of that belief that Jesus was the Messiah, no one thought of excommunicating them from Judaism. And the New Testament itself is proof of that. We know that Paul, wherever he went on Shabbos, they invited him to the shul, and he gave a drosha, and the apostles went to all the shuls, and they came to the temple and gave sacrifices. They were very much part of the Jewish people until about 60 or 70 years after Jesus died, when the Christians started bringing all these false doctrines about the Savior who was going to shed blood and a man who became a god and not keeping his word. And at that time the rabbis decided to make a break from Christianity. So the fact that you believe someone is a Messiah, that's definitely not anti-Jewish. After Jesus, 100 years after him, there's a person called Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva and many other rabbis of his generation thought even today, some people think a certain man living in New York is a Messiah. So whether or not they believe that, that's got nothing to do with him being Jewish, okay? So if a missionary comes to, this is not the real point to argue about. The only thing to tell them is that show them all the prophecies, and if whoever's interested, we can show them across, show them the prophecies that haven't been fulfilled. His only answer will be, well, okay, you're right, but what the second coming, and ask him to prove to you about the second coming, which he can't. Okay, because the main difference is not the main difference is not whether the Messiah is not the Messiah. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
I just want to end off with a little story that I'll take home. There was one girl who she was about to get married, and the father wanted to make the wedding something very, very special, something that no one had ever had before. So they decided that they thought, what can we do which is different? What type of wedding can we make from the ones that we had before? And the father came up with an amazing suggestion. Let's have it on the moon. So they hired Challenger, they got the band, they got the orchestra, they got everything organized. The caterers, everything, they went up to the moon. And the rabbi there, they had the service, fantastic, the food was great, everything was good. The father saw that his daughter, the bride, was sitting in the corner sulking. So he went up to her and said, was the band not good? She said, the band was wonderful. He said, the service, was there a problem with the service? He said, no, it was fantastic. He said, well, my daughter, what's the problem? Dad, you don't understand. She said, there was no atmosphere. The bottom line is that we have the atmosphere. We have it. In Torah, we've got everything. We've got so much, and this is the sad tragedy. Those people who do get involved, unfortunately today, a lot of them come from broken families, a lot of them come from being by themselves, being alone. It's our job, all of us, to try and see somebody who is looking or searching to show them the way, to show them the direction, to invite somebody over for a Friday night meal. And I think this way, together, if we all work together as Klal Yisrael, united, Jews for Jesus will become insignificant. There won't be a need for them. And hopefully there won't be need for these talks because there won't be a need for Jews having to look elsewhere. I want to thank Rabbi Bella for having put so much time and effort in organizing this talk this morning. And thank you all for coming on a Sunday morning.
I'd just like to thank Leslie and his wife and Raymond coming. I'm sorry about the technical problems. You do everything and then it just doesn't, the plugs don't fit. Thank you very much for coming. If any of you are interested in being involved in some way...
No. Karen Charette or something.
Hey!
I've been involved in B'nai Akiva since I was very young, and B'nai Akiva and Beta always had a very, very strong connection with each other, and may just continue. You guys are doing a superb job. Okay, just before we start, I must mention that this talk is not in any way at all aimed at defaming or degrading or in any way insulting Christianity at all. Not one bit, okay? I'm going to tell you why we're doing this talk, and you'll judge for yourselves. But I must just say from the outset that we have no intention whatsoever of putting down Christianity one bit. Okay. In the last 19 years, and since the breakup of the Beatles, I don't know if you remember the Beatles, maybe you were too young for the time.
I do remember.
But since the Beatles broke up, more people in the last 19 years have voluntarily converted to Christianity than in the last 19 centuries. It's like quite a heavy statistic, okay? The last 19 years, more Jews have voluntarily converted to Christianity than in the last 1900 years. According to Moti Berger from Asia Torah in Jerusalem, he says that there are more Jews involved in Jews for Jesus than all the guys sitting in yeshivas throughout the world. Very frightening thing that. And according to a Christian magazine, Chrisisma, in the 1987 edition, they say that there are over 100,000 Jews for Jesus in the United States alone. Okay. The story's told that a very wealthy guy, he had a party, and in his party he wanted to make it special. So he had a pool, and in his pool he had like man-eating crocodiles. And he said, whoever swims from the one side to the other side, whatever he wants, like I'll grant him. Whatever he wants, I'll grant him. So they're having a party. All of a sudden, everybody hears there's a splash in the water. They all run down to the pool, and they see that there's somebody in the water. So they all crowd around the pool, and they see that this guy's swimming, and he's swimming like for his life. He's like, moving it, he's looking at them. So they all crowd around. The guy comes out of the water. Can't believe that he made it through these man-infested crocodiles and like sharks and everything in this pool. He gets out. The owner of the house says, I can't believe it, you did it. What is your wish? What is your greatest wish? The guy says, I want to know if you pushed me into the water. Okay, when you go out of school and when you go out of varsity, you're going to meet not sharks in the water, you're going to meet some very heavy people. People who you're going to see today on the videos, and people you're going to see in our talks, who are out there to eat, out there to gain you. Let me just show you, when I was at varsity a couple of years ago, I was walking through campus, and this was posted at Wits campus. It said here, an experience of Messianic joy featuring the liberated Wailing Wall. This was posted all over Wits campus. And we went there. It was at the Great Hall. We went there. Jewish music, yarmulkes, unbelievable music going on. These were the Jews for Jesus that came from the United States. And that's how they started. In the Star newspaper not long ago, Friday, December the 15th, 89, they had a full-page advertisement saying Christmas would be impossible without the Jewish people. Full-page advertisement. Now, if you put a little insertion into the Star, just like about a mazel tov that someone had a kid or something, that's a couple of $100. This alone runs into the tens of thousands of rands. And this was in the Star newspaper. Again in the Star, they had also, like the same year, in Hebrew. This was targeted to the Israelis living in this country, the other 20,000, about the Mashiach, Yeshua Mashiach, in the Star. This is the heavy part. The Jews for Jesus, what they do now is that they've changed their tactics, and they issue wonderful brochures. So if you're walking, or you get it in the post, something like this which says issues, it says nothing about Jews for Jesus, it says a Messianic Jewish perspective. Nothing about Jesus, no crosses. You turn over, it tells you about Jerusalem, about the shtetl. You read a bit further on, and they even go on about Pesach. Now in this issues of Pesach, in the middle they say that sure you can celebrate Pesach. Say, you know what the three matzahs stand for? You know you have the three matzahs? So they say it's simple. The three matzahs are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And they go and say, and what about, why do we have the wine? They say the wine is the blood of Jesus. And even more, they say that we have 4 cups of wine. So what do the 4 cups of wine represent? The 4 Gospels. So this is in the Issues magazine it doesn't even say Jews for Jesus, but this is their magazine. And you go a bit further, they say, and it's from all over, like how to win the Jews. And it goes step by step from what you should do, your tactic, which verse you must use, how to actually win the Jews. And then here's even more. These are all from South Africa, these that we're showing you now. This is the good news. This is done from a Reverend Sullivan. They show you Old and New Jerusalem. And you open up and it's got about the New Testament and about Jesus. And this is one which comes from Bloemfontein, which says Shalom. Okay, what's frightening is, have you read like Time Magazine, US News, Newsweek? You open it up and then here's one again. Sure, I'm Jewish and I celebrate Christmas. And they give you a whole introduction to this chap, misquoting the verses, but how he celebrates Christmas. Okay, we're going to start off now with a video of, we managed to get it. Daryl and I went to Birmingham in the UK, in England, about 2.5 years back. And we're going to show you how it actually operates in the UK, in England. And then we'll show you how it actually operates in this country. Okay, any questions that we're going to do is just keep your questions. Feel very relaxed and interrupt at any time, but we're going to have a question session at the end. And really, you must feel very relaxed as I said it, I want you to really realize that this talk is aimed only at Jews. We have never given this talk to non-Jews. Our aim has never been to tell non-Jews that they're wrong. That's not our aim at all. Our aim is to keep Jews Jewish, and we'll see why it's so important. Should we switch off the main lights?
Yeah.
No, that's great.
Who would have believed our reports and the aim of the Lord, over whom hath it been revealed? Yea, he grew up like a small shoot, before him, and as a root out of dry land. Be bad no form nor comeliness.
No, she's doing well.
So that we should look at him, and know countenance, so that we should desire him. He was despised and shunned by men, a man of pains and acquainted. I can't read them.
No, continue. You're doing well.
And acquainted with disease, and as one who did his face from us, only our diseases did he bear himself, and our pains had carried. While we indeed esteemed him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted, yet he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and through his bruises was healing granted to us. We all like sheep went astray, and every one to his own way did he return. And the Lord laid before him the guilt of us all. He was oppressed, and he was also taunted, yet he opened not his mouth, like the lamb which is led to the slaughter, and like a ewe before her shearers is dumb. And he opened out his mouth through oppression, and through judicial punishment was he taken away. But his generation, who could tell that he was cut away out of the land of life? For the transgressions of my people, the plague was laid on him, and he let his grave be made with the wicked, and with the rich at his death. Although he had done no violence, and there was no deceit in his mouth, but the Lord was pleased to crush him through disease. When his soul hath brought the trespass offering, then shall he see seed. Live many days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. From the trouble of his soul shall he see and be satisfied. Bring the many to righteousness, while he will bear their iniquities. Therefore will I divide him with the many, and with the strong shall he divide the spoil. Because he poured out his soul unto death, and with transgressors was he numbered, while bore the sin of many, and for the transgressors he left before him.
Okay. If I had to ask you, who thinks this comes from the Jewish or the Christian Bible? Think about it, what we just read. Put up your hands. Those who think it comes from the Jewish Bible. We got two. Those who think it comes from the Christian Bible. Very interesting. Okay, this actually, and this is what's so frightening, this actually comes from the Jewish Bible. This is from Isaiah 53. Now in Isaiah 53, this what we just read, this is where they say that this is the proof that Jesus came to be the Messiah, and they take this Isaiah 53. It said that he did no violence, he was born from iniquities. I just want to tell you, there was one girl who came from the Rima church. She was an actress, came with a very big crush, came into our place, and I said to her, how did you get involved? What made you get involved in it? How did you become a Jew for Jesus? So she said to me, it's so simple. I opened the Bible, and there was Isaiah 53. They showed me Isaiah 53. And who else could it be talking about if it's not talking about Jesus? Okay, so you know what we did? I said, well, let's have a look. So we looked into the New Testament. The New Testament is a Christian Bible. And we saw that is this really talking about Jesus. It said there that he went to the slaughter and he opened his mouth. If you look in the New Testament, you'll see that when he was put on the cross, not only didn't he open his mouth, but he shouted in a loud voice, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. It's my God, why have you forsaken me? When he came to Pontius Pilate, he wasn't quiet. He opened his mouth. But more important than that, in Isaiah 53, it says he did no violence. Okay? Now, all you have to do is just open a bit of the New Testament and you'll see Matthew, the very first book of the Gospel is called Matthew. In Matthew 10:34, Jesus himself says something which most Christians don't even know. And especially the Jews for Jesus don't even know. He says, I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. It's heavy stuff, hey? I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to turn a father against the son, and a mother against the daughter. In Luke, which is another gospel, Jesus says again, I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. He says, if you do not hate your family, you're not worthy of me. Now, just to tell you how important this is, a young guy, a university student, he was shown these verses from the New Testament where it said, I've come to bring a father against the son. He said, come with us. Who do you prefer? Who do you like better? Your father or Jesus? So he decided, he says, well, at this moment in time I like Jesus better. So he left home. And for 3 days he was missing. Parents didn't know where he was, and they took it from the New Testament. So whenever they show you Isaiah 53, if you read the whole Bible, and they'll take out verses. If ever you come across a missionary, be very careful because they're very cunning. They'll take out certain verses. If you only look a few chapters back in Isaiah 49, verse 3, it says, my servant Israel. And which other nation has suffered so much as according to this? And even if they say, well, maybe it's talking about a person, Isaiah himself, Jeremiah, the exiles, they were killed, they were put through all this, and they were good people. So don't ever be fooled. Always read the whole of the verse, the whole of the chapter, and you'll see it's not at all. And even if you look a bit into the New Testament, it says, but nothing. There is no, but this we'll discuss a bit later. Okay, now, is the video working? Okay, now we're going to have somebody, until we get the video working, you're a little privileged to have somebody who's actually been there, who was once enticed into the Jews for Jesus, and we're very lucky to have him speaking to us today. And I call on Daryl Kruger, he's going to address you. And if you have any questions, just keep them and we're going to discuss them afterwards, okay?
Just like to correct what Leah said, I wasn't actually enticed into them, but I was on the periphery of actually making some very heavy decisions in my life, which rode to turn. Just to give you some background about myself, I came from a totally secular background. Secular in the sense about the closest I ever came to any form of religion, being Jewish. So my mother used to light the candles on a Friday night. Had a mitzvah, and that was about it. Hated every moment of it. I left. After university, well, there were a couple of Meshuggahs in university, a couple of missionaries, but I never really paid any much attention to them myself. I often came up with the question of why the Jews did not ever accept Jesus. If we're living in a Christian society in South Africa, and one gets quite secluded from the Jewish viewpoints, especially if one is not actually involved in any Jewish group at all. So the question often used to sort of cross my path is why didn't the Jews accept him? If he was meant to be Jewish, he was meant to lead, and look what's happening in the world today. I mean, most of the world are Christian anyway. Well, there's about 100 or something like that. So what happened was, I'd say the question really came to a head at the turn of my interimship. That's just after I'd finished university. I was working for a group of architects, and a very, very good architect who I knew was Jewish, who went to King David, in fact, happened to be working there at the time. And I struck up talking to him, and next thing I found out that he, in fact, had become a Rima dreamer, as they called in those days. And he had married a goy, and she was pregnant. So I thought, okay, let's ask him a couple of questions. And I had a couple of arguments with J witnesses who come to the door, but they're not really easy to refute. All you have to do is bang the door in their face and they go away. But what happened was, with Leonard was a different thing, because I wanted to know. This is somebody who's fluent in Hebrew, somebody who I knew was a very intelligent guy. I'm going to change names just to protect people. His name, for the sake of it, was called Leonard, okay? I'm I asked Leonard quite simply, what's going on? How's this possible? You, a Jewish boy who can speak Hebrew, went to King David. How do you get it? He says, the Jews don't know God. And I said, what do you mean the Jews don't know God? The Jews don't really know who God is. I said, really, how do you substantiate that? So we struck up a conversation. He pulled out his King James Version Bible. And myself not being able to read Hebrew at all, I opened on the verses, and what does he show? Lo and behold, just opens the book, for instance, to Isaiah 7:14. And I'll actually just read you the verses if you want. This is a Goyish Bible. And he's taking it from the Jewish book of Isaiah, which is, I knew was a Jewish book, and that's, why I was prepared to listen to it. So I went to the book of Isaiah 7:14, and it says as follows. Reading from 7, if you ever open it up, just make sure you open a kosher version, because it can be quite deceptive. It's quite a fundamental one. So it says over here. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son and call his name Emmanuel. So, well, what's going on? This is from the Jewish Bible. Talking about a virgin with Emmanuel. And so I thought, well, okay, that's one of them. But there were a lot more. As you just read Isaiah 53. These are things I actually cared about. I've never cared about religion in my life, but these things really mattered to me. And there was also one in Zechariah which talks about the Jews will one day look upon him who they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him. There will be great mourning in Jerusalem. Psalm 22, they pierced my hands and my feet. There's a whole lot of them. We can actually give you sources if you want. And this really got me going, and I started reading and reading more and more. My wife at the time thought I'd gone totally haywire, and I started running around with the Bible and reading. So at work, we didn't work that much. We'd be having biblical discussions. And what happened was, slowly but surely, I began to think that the Jews had lost it. They'd lost it. They'd taken the wrong path. And Leonard himself invited me to one of their meetings, which was a small group held in Berea. And what happened was, there was a guy by the name of Bruce, who was a Jew, and he really knew about the stuff. He could read Hebrew, and he knew exactly what was going on. And I felt a little bit awkward, but I thought, if I'm doing the main thing, which is actually the correct thing to do, and if my own people, the Jews, had gone off the rails, the Holocaust happened, they were being slaughtered like lambs, and they were paying the price for not accepting the Messiah. So I thought, I've got to see this. My wife thought, we used to have, it was a very traumatic part of our lives, and basically, I wouldn't say she was contemplating leaving me or anything, but it really was, the road got very bumpy. This happened in, I'd say, a duration of about 3 months, and in that time I went to places. I went to Rima once. I felt awkward. There was another when some Lebanese guy came to speak in Nazareth, and I'm not joking, you have about, say, 10,000 people, with people going up to be healed, and they'd lay hands, the person would fall back, and the person would take his crutches and throw it. These are very things which actually happen before your eyes. People are seeing miracles. You're going to shul, it's a totally different setup altogether. And, I wouldn't say that I'd actually come to accept it, but I'd say it came to the end of the precipice where it really was at a crossroads in my life. Just what was quite important at the same time was that I knew that, I believed and I knew that whatever was in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, had to be true, and anything which went against that was not true. But there was still that question of why didn't the Jews accept him? What was going on? So what happened was I went to more of their meetings, and I started asking more and more questions. And fortunately at my wife's firm there was somebody by the name of Bradley who heard what had happened to me, and he brought in a tape of Aisha Torah. I brought Bruce to my place that night, and we sat and firstly Bruce confronted Bradley. Bradley's a fruit guy wearing a yarmulke, and Bruce started asking questions of Bradley, and Bradley had egg on his face, couldn't answer. In fact, Bradley said, when Bruce said to him, have you read what it says in Daniel 9 verse 25 about the crucifixion, cutting off the Messiah and the destruction of the temple of Daniel? All what Bradley could say is, excuse my ignorance, is Daniel from the Newer Old Testament. And myself as an observer, as Jew, we really don't know anything. We're quite a bunch of idiots, aren't we, the Jewish people? So I said, listen to this tape and we'll take it. I listened very carefully. And the tape went right through everything, right from every verse. Jeremiah 31:31, where it talks about a new covenant, what the refutation was. And I heard all these repetitions, and I started to... fortunately, I was taping the tape at the same time. And what happened was we went through the whole thing. Bruce was writing furiously, and I was saying, what's going on now? Because I'm starting to hear the other side of the whole thing. And at the end of the night, Bruce says, well, I can refute all of that. So we left it at that. We didn't have time. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And what happened was Bruce gave me refutations, because there are a lot of refutations. And they, basically Christianity is the dark side of Judaism. most of their stuff, which we think is alien to Judaism, is either crept in from Talmudic sources or from Agorim or something like that. But what happened was I went through this continual turnover. Where do we take a word from here? And I was, going crazy. So what I did was they kept telling me, pray to God and ask Him to reveal to you who is Yeshua, who is Jesus. And what I did was, I actually got down, not in front of them, but myself. And I was in a real traumatic time of my life. And I sweated. I was in a very, very bad state. And I actually poured out my heart to God. And no sparks, no suns and moons happened or anything like that. But what happened was, they phoned me from another Jewish institution and said, we've got somebody else to meet you, which was Les over here. And what happened was Bruce came again that night, and then there was a full-on confrontation between Bruce and Les, and the rabbi just observed there. And I listened, and I listened. I didn't partake nothing. And I just heard everything come through, repetition upon repetition. I got more sources. And gradually what happened was, from that moment on, I thought to myself, right, there are certain obligations I'm bound to do by the Torah, and the fact that I'm Jewish, I have to do it whether I believe or I don't believe. So I started going to shul on Saturday to observe Shabbat. And what happened was like a totally different thing, because when I came from, I'd say, United Synagogue, well, that's English, I'd say, or normal secular sort of place. I don't want to mention any places, but you don't get that kind of feeling. Here there was people who were really vibrant, who were really into what they were doing. And one could actually pick up a lot of things. And as like I was reading, we're reading Hallel, that talks about the cornerstone that the builders rejected, which is a Christian verse that they use. So I actually see how things began to slot in further and further. And what happened was, I didn't stop there. Although I realized things were actually turning around in my life. The table was starting to turn. I could say, pray again to God, pray to Him. So I did. And without actually revelations happening, more and more I was led back into my own fold, and I started to observe more and more. And actually, my wife wasn't at the time before we actually moved to London. My work took me to London for 3 years, but in London she started actually coming within the Jewish part. Leonard, in the meanwhile, I thought was a lost case, because Leonard, in fact, was married. He gave birth to a child. He called the child Emmanuel, which is from Isaiah 7 verse 14, which means God is with us. I'll tell you about Leonard later on. So what happened was, I reached a point where, till this day, I haven't stopped actually reading comparative literature between Judaism and Christianity. The Synagogue will stay with me, because I've generated in another direction now. But finding more and more my own feet in my own religion was what I was about. And eventually we left to go to London, and we went to a very frum area, which is called Golders Green. I don't know if any of you have been there. But immediately I asked the question, is there any sort of missionary movement towards the Jews? And yes, there was. There was actually a messianic, I haven't got the pamphlet, messianic synagogue there in Bridge Lane, read by a Rabbi Chuck, in inverted commas, Snow. That was his surname. And what happened was, I went to meet Chuck Snow, and Chuck Snow looked like he'd come out from ZZ Top with a beard down to there, with a yarmulke, with tzitzis, and with a big golden sign across his chest, Yeshua, HaMashiach, and Magen David and everything else like that. And what happened was, we met with them a couple of times. I struck up friendships in London at Hyde Park Corner, which you'll actually see on the video over here. The Jews for Jesus go there every single Sunday, and one gets up and there's little tables, and you can just go and argue with whoever you want to. You can talk to them, the missionaries are Jews. But the actual part which gets to me is, one actually has a look and sees that the tracks, like Les was showing, how they've taken this whole Christian message, and actually, ironically, I never actually came to it that way. I came to it from a purely sort of Gentile Christian point, not the sort of koshed up version of people wearing yarmulkes and, singing Shalom Aleichem with crucifixes and all sorts of things like that. It really made quite an impression. The other thing which was also very important is how they actually enticed me into this kind of thing was, they make you feel that you've never had it so bad before. The fact that you may not be guilty, what is the difference between the Jewish message and the Christian message? It's very simple. And the Christian message is, if you do not believe, you will roast in hell, which is emotional blackmail for anybody. That's the way if they can't win converts by reason, they win them by fear. Now, I'd say I wasn't really rocked. I was a little bit concerned about it naturally, but it goes in one step further than that. If a child was born, the doctrine is that he will go to hell as well. Why? Because Adam ate from the fruit, and he sinned, and we've inherited the sinful fruit of Adam, and therefore if we die, even if you were one day, you're going to hell, this is the doctrines of the Christians. I'm not running down Christianity like Les says as well. But anyway, I just thought it'd be quite important to actually embark on that point. The other points that they also try and make me feel, not so much these proof verses. Proof verses are one thing, but they try and make you feel that the Jews have really lost it. Like in Ezekiel, it talks about where you'll be scattered to the desert and you didn't listen to God. And basically, the Jews are such a stiff-necked, upper, tight-lipped nation, and basically they're into their own sort of thing. And we come from. They're basically saying, what's happened to the Jews over the last 2,000 years? You are paying for the price of what you did by not accepting your Messiah. These are arguments which I went into in London with people, back and forth, and especially like at Hyde Park Corner. But just to get to some points which are quite interesting, there is a group in London, at least in Jerusalem, called the Biblical Polemics Institute, which actually gives out a lot of literature, and that actually got a hold of in London. We were distributing itself. By now, I'd actually returned to the fold. I was actually learning about my own Yiddishkeit. What happened was this Rabbi Chuck Snow, when we were there, he actually put on a show, and lo and behold, who was on? Ellen Shapiro herself. And we went in there and we started taking photographs, and they got very upset. I actually went with a ger who was a very, very bright person and actually knew a lot of the verses. And we spoke to Chuck Snow. We had another meeting with him. He couldn't read a word of Hebrew, nothing. I'll come back to Chuck Snow because something interesting has transpired with him since I came back to the country. All right, coming back to the country, things got really bad in London work-wise. I returned here, and my person who's now my partner these days, Leonard, the guy who actually got me involved, I returned here. He had a long face. What happened was when I returned, his wife had walked out on him. She was having an affair with a Chinaman, and what happened was I had come back at exactly the right time to sort of, get him back for what he did to me, to bring him back. So I started taking at least Leonard to lots of these institutes, to Shiurim and everything else like that. He saw he couldn't believe me wearing a yarmulke and everything like that. And he was sending me plenty of these issues and lots of doctrines. In fact, I'll show you something very interesting in here. Just to sidetrack slightly, one of these issues over here, which Leonard sent me, because it's all underlined with all the points. But one point which is very interesting. I know this is sidetrack, but I'll get back onto my track. What happened was, this gives a story of where a person was in New York, and what happened was he had an argument. Same type of story. I think that's why Leonard sent it to me, because it's quite a similar scenario to what we had. Okay, you can see there's Hebrew writings, all sorts of things over here, where there's two people having an argument, and the one person said, "Have you read the New Testament?" "No, why not?" And then what happened was, Mark said that what happened was, phoned up his friend, he said, "You won't believe it, I went to Newsstand, and what was there?" It was a New Testament, then I took it out to read. So the person says, well, he came back to meet Mark, and he had a look in our reader. When Mark and I first met, he seemed more intent on proving me wrong. Now this is the Jew for Jesus writing. Then I'm considering whether or not I believed it had any validity. After all, I was firm and confident as we shook hands. He was convinced that I'd be put in my place by the time the interchange was over. I noticed his beardless face and asked, "Are you Orthodox?" expecting a negative reply. "Yep," he responded. I leaned over and peered towards the back of his head. "Are you wearing a kippah?" Mark could detect a mild jest in my voice as he opened his desk drawer and pulled out his black skull cap, which identifies observant Jews. He then reached in the lower drawer and displayed his tefillin. And he said, 3 times a day. And I nodded to show that I was impressed. Anybody who knows here knows that no Jew puts on tefillin 3 times a day. So I laughed. I mean, the whole thing was just, you could have just taken the crucifixes off and used their own ignorant stuff and just coached the whole thing up. But again, getting back to Leonard. Leonard today, I'd say by reason and by answering all his tracts and by him actually seeing the fruits of what his religion was all about, has become totally parv. I wouldn't say that he's returned back to the fold of Judaism, but he totally realizes and acknowledges the mistakes and the deceit behind the Christian doctrines. We are partners today. We don't discuss religion or anything like that. He realizes that his son is not Jewish because the mother's not Jewish, and obviously maybe, as time actually goes by, we can see what he can do if he wants to give him a Jewish education, maybe convert him back. But from my side, I would just like to end on a very interesting note what I spoke about with Rabbi Chuck Snow. Helen Shapiro's out here recently, as I said. What happened was counseling a couple of people at the moment. One person who's actually an usher at Rima, who's a Jewish boy. It goes through the one ear, it goes out the other ear. These people don't accept doctrines. You've got to get them in out of it the way they got into it, which is an emotional side. These people are not rational. If you show them in black and white that Jesus himself would say, I'm not the Messiah, they wouldn't listen to it. They wouldn't accept. They feel it. They feel it inside there. That's where it comes from. Which is something, one can't refute feelings, but there are ways to refute feelings. And one of the things which actually did touch him very much was this. When we were in London, we saw Helen Shapiro, and Chuck Snow put it on. It was the Messianic Rabbi. I haven't got, unfortunately, an article on him, but showing me his photograph. What happened was, somebody brought me an article screaming loud. Look at this article. This was about 3 months ago. And it says in big letters, this I think was in the Jerusalem Post, it says, Messianic Rabbi deserts his post. And you read in there, Chuck Snow has deserted his congregation in London, and he is now in yeshiva, learning exactly what it's all about. And when I told this to this person that I'm counseling, his mouth just fell open. He says, I've just seen Helen Shapiro. I said, well, ask Helen Shapiro, where's your Rebbe? So I'd like to end with that. That's fine, if you can just...
But I said that I didn't want to do it the 2 weeks. And they knew that I wouldn't want to do that, but they said come along and just have a week of learning. So I went along to that, and we'll teach you why they believe Jesus is the Messiah, all the prophecy that they believe Jesus has fulfilled.
The pogroms, the inquisitions, these days their methods have changed, they become more humane. Instead of killing people's bodies, they kill their minds. Now she herself, if she had to come to somebody, she's just maybe a good example, because I mean, if she came, you'd probably laugh her out of your place. You know she's not Jewish and everything else. If a guy came who you knew was Jewish, and you knew that he knew what he was speaking about, and he sounded very Jewish, and he even looked like a bit of a rabbi or something, that's where the danger is, and those people are right there as well. Sorry, go on.
When you get knocked at your door and you see the person and say, Jews for Jesus, I'd just like 10 minutes of your time, whatever. Well, like I know, I would never even just let them say 1 minute.
But you know what happens? They don't say that we're Jews for
They don't
Jesus.
say we're Jews from Jesus. They'll come with you, they come with the cryptic word. They say, how would you know to recognize the
You just
Messiah?
say, well, I'm talk about
They say, well, imagine if a guy comes, he's got a yarmulke, he's got pants, he says, excuse me, how would you recognize who the Messiah is? What would you say? You'd say, well, no, I'm Jewish, look at me. Yeah.
Judaism doesn't like to advertise itself.
Correct. That's correct. Maybe you know that, but a lot of people wouldn't know that. Maybe they could say, well, you might think he's a straight Lubavitcher or something.
Yeah.
You know, Lubavitchers actually do that towards their own people. They try and get people to, have you been to London, you go to even I think somewhere around here they've done it as well, in Jerusalem, they actually invite guys to later film every day. So they actually do have that kind of one. But that's, yes.
You can all ask. You must be totally free to ask any questions, okay?
Okay. You got a question? You haven't got a question? Yeah, go on.
Do Jews for Jesus, they keep Christmas and all that, they don't keep Shabbat?
Some of them do. Some of them do. Some of them even try and keep Shabbat. It's just that, like on the video, which we won't show, like somebody actually said to Richard Harvey, said, well, you know, look at the Christian calendar. The first day of the week is a Sunday, and it says God rested on the seventh day. Why are you people keeping? You know, he says, no, we keep Shabbat on Friday, Saturday. But like we've got a bonus, you know, the Christians had the day the Lord rose, which was a Sunday, and that's why they keep that as their Sabbath. So he says, like, that's a kind of a bonus. No, they won't keep kashrut because they say that's made up by the rabbis, and it says simply in the, they probably won't eat pork, a lot of them won't eat pork, a lot of them will. I can't speak in German, I can tell you. A lot of them, but generally most of them won't observe milk and meat because they say that, you know, it just says do not see the kid in its mother's milk. But they say that, you know, the rabbis made something else and we're not interested in that. They've missed the point.
If I'm correct, when God said that He created the heavens and the earth, it doesn't say created the heavens, earth and hell, heavens and hell. So I don't know where people get this thing of hell.
The hell crept in when they went into the Babylonian exile first time. They came out, it's like you live in this world here, you get influence of people around you. And you had sectarian, you had Persian, what is it called again? The sectarianism thing, which was Persian dualism there. And basically, where you can see that reflected, that influence, you have the paganistic ideas of hellfire going towards the end of the world. You know, they used to navigate, they wouldn't go too far in the ships because they said they fall into the pit of fire. These things all crept into religion, and in fact, who got influenced the most with those was the Essenes. And like in the Essenes, they talk about, you know, the Dead Sea Scrolls. They talk about this, the wars of the sons of light and the sons of dark and eternal damnation and hell. But these are real pagan things where they picked up when they were in Babylon exile. These were things which are actually crept in through the back of the religion. And actually, a lot of the doctrines that are found in the New Testament are quite... There's a close parallel between them and the Dead Sea Scrolls. These guys had that same kind of idea. They never stood the test of time, but that's exactly where it comes from. We have something called Gehenna, okay? Or Sheol, which is not your eternal barbecue like the Christians have. Yeah, that's where it comes from.
Okay.
Yes.
Do they go to church as well?
Okay, so can I answer that one? Yeah, okay. It's very interesting. They had a guy called David Breckner. He was head of the Chicago Jews for Jesus. So he came out here about 5 years ago. So they advertised the Jews for Jesus. So a few of us went in there with our yarmulkes on, and we sat in that meeting. And in the beginning, it was about Isaiah 53 and all this. That was the first part. The second part was totally Christian service. So basically, what they do, what the Jews for Jesus do, it's like a bridging gap. That they know that no Jew in his right mind would just walk into a church. It's too foreign. It's something too strange. But if they become involved in like Jews for Jesus, so they will slowly show them the way, and slowly they will actually bridge the gap, and then they can go into the church. So they can feel initially that it's like a messianic meeting, but then eventually it becomes very Christian, and they marry a lot of non-Jews. And once they marry non-Jews, like what Daryl mentioned, it's very difficult to get them out. They're not impossible, but it's very difficult.
Is that if someone from another religion is talking to you, right?
Yeah.
If you are headstrong, they will not break through that. If you are strong enough into your religion, then it's almost impossible for them to break through that. Unless they are absolutely so convincing that there's nothing you can do.
They will never approach you with the New Testament. They will take the Hebrew Bible and they'll show you your own Bible. So therefore you can't ignore them. Whatever they're trying to show you, they're using your sources. And most of the times they know the sources better than most of you secular Jews know. And even a lot of the Frum Jews.
But still, you can pick it up because they don't always come up. They are more like secular themselves.
You've got to actually take it on yourself to defend your own religion. I mean, how would you feel good within yourself if some guy comes along and tells you more about your own Bible than you know? No ways. You want to refute it.
I'd feel okay because I'm religion. It wouldn't bother me so long as he does not convert me to his religion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good if you can think of it. A lot of people actually would think, well, you know, he's using my sources. He's taking something which is mine. With my grandparents is actually, you know, using that against me, and I can't answer him. A lot of people would try, and when they go into that, then they come short. What you're doing is the correct approach. You don't talk to them.
Can I say something on this?
Yeah.
I just want to mention something what you... Sorry, what's your name?
Yeah,
very nice point you brought up there. I feel very, very similar to you in that way. And it's not only for religion, it's for everything really. If you look at Zionism, take Zionism for instance, Beitar has got an incredible ideology, something that I follow as well. I believe in that ideology totally. So when you read a book which is like anti-Zionistic, but you're very strong in your own Zionism, you can be open to read any book. Because you know that like Hashem said in the very first thing that He created the world and He gave us the land of Israel. So you can read any book from any source whatsoever, and it doesn't worry me. So that's why when you read like O Jerusalem or things like that, and you read, don't ever be put off. You know, there's one very interesting word. The Hebrew language is absolutely incredible. It was given by God, so it's got inherent holiness in it. The word emet. Have any of you actually ever thought about the word emet? What is the first letter of the word emet? What is the second? And the last? So where does it come from? Aleph is the very first letter of the alphabet, Mem is in the middle, and Taf is at the end. So it's like three, it's like a 3-pine. It's so stable because it's the truth. The truth is the truth. And that's why you take all the religions, they might have bits of truth in it, they might take out little bits of truth, but the bottom line is Hashem gave it to us, He created the world. And I just want to leave you with one interesting thing. When people say, look, the Jews, they're all They like to keep to themselves, they like to be separate. I was just very recently at a very unfortunate incident. I had to go to a funeral, and there were Muslims at that funeral, there were Hindus, and there were a lot of Jews. And it was held in a chapel, and the Reverend got up to speak, and he must have said about 4 or 5 times that only, and it was actually my nurse who had passed away. There were a lot of Jews because, you know, our practice is Jewish. And he said, only if you believe in Jesus are you going to go to heaven. Now that's heavy, and he didn't say it once, he said it quite a few times. Judaism has never ever said that. In fact, we're the only religion. The Muslims say only if you believe that Muhammad is the last prophet will go to heaven. Judaism believes that everyone, not only Jews, that every good person goes to heaven. In fact, Christianity goes even a bit further. They say that only if you believe in Jesus will God listen to you. So you know what? You can, if you know this, you see, if you know what Judaism is, one doesn't have to be afraid at all. But on the other hand, if some missionary, like this guy, these are trained, they are trained, you cannot believe they go for like years training, they're brainwashed. So they come and they tell you, and they show you verses, and say you're not so strong, say you're not like you say somebody else who doesn't really know what's out. And they come and they confront them with the verses. My advice is, say, you know, hold on, say, I'm Jewish, I'm proud of being Jewish, leave me alone. And I say to them, rather, it's so simple. I'll give you one little simple answer. When I was at Baragwanath, working in Soweto, so the nurses used to come often to me and say, gee, you know, why don't you believe in Jesus as the Messiah? They came to me quite often. So I'm getting enough of it. Every day he's saying the same things. So I said to them, you know, it's a bit strange. I had, and this was quite a few years ago, I said, I had a few Afrikaans patients, very nice patients. They believe that Jesus is their Messiah. You believe that Jesus is your Messiah. But why do you hate each other? Why do you hate each other with such venom? If you both believe he's the same Messiah. How can it be? So sometimes you have to look the other way around. And that's so simple. That is the most simple thing. And at the Ramban, Nachmanides, the Ramban in Spain, 1263, he said when they were forced to have a talk, when they were forced to have a disputation, so he said, look how the world looks today. That was 1263. Look at all the fighting, look at all the world. What is the Messiah? And Daryl's going to just briefly tell you exactly what the Messiah is supposed to do. And then you'll realize that it hasn't happened yet. Okay? We'll answer, I promise you will answer.
I mean, started, but don't you think that just as he deserved to see the two sides of the story, don't you think we as Jewish young kids deserve to see what they have to say without just seeing the one side?
Okay, so here I'll tell you. To see what they have to say, there are many books, tremendous amount of books, and it's a very interesting field. You can get the book called History of the Jews by Paul Johnson, a non-Jew. There's so many non-Jews who've written on Jewish history, incredible people. If you read, you see here, you brought up a very good thing. If you read a Bible, you can get this Bible, which is called the King James Version, or you can get the Good News Version. There are a whole lot of versions of the New Testament. Now, they quoted here, the Jews for Jesus, Isaiah 7:14, about the virgin birth. Have you all heard of the virgin birth? Have any of you heard that Mary was a virgin? Okay. In most of the new Christian Bibles, and this is, they've admitted, which is incredible, they've admitted that the word virgin, Betula, but in the Hebrew the word is Alma, doesn't mean a virgin. So if you open the correct Bible, the correct Christian Bible, and this is what we do, we show them the correct Bible. We show them a non-Jewish Bible, and we show them that, look what your own righteous people, they're good people. Don't get me wrong, the majority of the Christians are incredible today. We've got here, we'll show you on anti-Semitism, where you get professors of history admitting that the Holocaust could not have happened if not for Christian anti-Semitism. To make such a statement is unbelievable. It takes a lot to make such a statement. It takes a hell of a lot to admit that the word in Isaiah 7:14 isn't a virgin. So they've admitted that they made a mistake. And it's in the Bible. You just have to be shown the correct Bible. So on your question, to be shown the other side, who do you show the other side? You show somebody like a Jew for Jesus who knows that he's wrong, who's been told that he's wrong, who you take a new Bible and say, why do you quote the wrong Bible? He doesn't care. Or do you take somebody who, and we can show you here, we can actually show you just now if you want, where they say, we've admitted they made a mistake. And there are a lot of books coming out where they admit that what Christianity has done to the Jewish people wasn't right.
Well, I'm saying that you coming here and telling us that you give us your side of the story, but I think it would benefit if we come and say, and give us your side of the story.
Let me ask you one
We
question.
can't live in Dallas.
Okay, let me ask you one question. This is, we just run a little anti-cult movement. It's unbelievable. Every document you ever have is how to win the Jews. I've got from the Mormons, from the Muslims, from everybody how to convert the Jews. How come it's never been, why don't the Jews convert the other people? So now what you're saying, why don't they come and speak to you? When have they ever in the history said, why don't the Jewish people come and tell them about the Bible? The Bible was first given to the Jews, as it is. They've got verses in the Bible which the rabbis have explained over the centuries. So why don't we get a rabbi to come speak? It works both ways. In Jerusalem, what's happening, and it's only in, I don't want to be like, but it's happening in our way. There's the institute that Daryl mentioned, the Institute of Biblical Polemics in Jerusalem. I was there in February. So what happens there, anybody can come. Anybody can come and speak, and there are missionaries there, there are reverends there.
Can I just add something to your question?
And they're open to talk.
If you want dialogue between two groups, it's got to be both ways. But if you just study just the structure of Christianity, and I mean Jews for Jesus, the same thing, because it is Christianity just dressed up. You have a look at the underlying forms of settings. There is no dialogue there. They have got a message to give. They're not interested in what you've got to say. They're not interested in that. They won't listen to a word you say, believe me. They've got their message to give, and if you don't accept their message, that's it.
I don't think they do the same thing of us. We just,
No, we don't. We don't. We don't condemn other religion, other people of other faiths to hell or anything like that. We basically don't seek converts. They seek converts. There's actually almost no meeting point apart from the fact that they use our Bible as their free.
Just to add on to Daryl, just to think that Judaism is the only religion, and you can go through all of them, and you should. The whole thing about the Gemara, if you ever go into it, it's discussion, it's arguments, it's no one has ever said, don't ever read this. It's forbidden to read this. So think about it. Judaism is the only religion on this earth that says that all good people go to heaven. We are the only people who believe it. No other religion on this earth believes that. They only say that only if you believe in us. Hare Krishnas. So that we're not dealing with Hare Krishnas. Jews are getting involved in Hare Krishnas. They don't even speak to them.
Yeah, I don't think you can use an example of that because when you look at the Jews, I think there's quite a lot of difference between the different.
There's a big difference. There's a massive difference. You know what the difference is? First of all, we don't say that the Messiah's come on. We believe that when the Messiah does come, that's a whole cup of believing in the Messiah.
What I'm saying is that
Hold on. That there'll be peace. That there'll be no strife at all. At all. That's what we believe the Messiah's going to come. Furthermore, when I was in England at that time with Daryl, and just try to understand this. It was either Roman Catholic or a Protestant, but they done it to each other. They phoned up a taxi driver to come and collect somebody from one part of Belfast to the other part. As soon as the taxi driver came, the Protestant or the Roman Catholic, I'm not sure which one did it, they knew that they were the other religion, the other part of Christianity. They shot him, just because it was a different religion. In this country, what only goes on, the hatred, I mean, you have to actually go to Soweto, where I worked, and the hatred for the Afrikaner is intense, and it's unbelievable. But that's the whole thing. If they believe that the Messiah, what is the Messiah? Christos means Christ. Okay, what is Christ? He's the Messiah. So what is the Messiah? The Messiah is a symbol of peace, which is our Messiah. That's what we believe. What's all Chapim believing where a Messiah is? It says in Isaiah, it says in Psalms, that when the Messiah comes, there will go into it a bit more. There'll be peace on earth. So when they say to us, why don't you believe that Jesus is the Messiah? There's no peace today. Jesus is like, you're a bit worried getting back to Joburg, and you know what's going to happen here. I had a patient who was killed the night that she phoned me. She was just raped and killed. It's very heavy. Where's the peace? I mean, we need peace badly. So when they say, gee, why don't you believe Jesus is the Messiah? I don't say you have to be a little duck, but just look around you. Where's the peace? I hope I haven't been too heavy. I really hope I haven't been too heavy. Should we hand to me now?
First of all, so far you've been showing us from a perspective that the Jews are actually getting influenced by other Jews that are involved in Jews for Jesus and are converting more to the Christian side of that. So what about are there any Christians that are actually becoming more Jewish in the opposite direction? And
yes, okay, nice question.
Go on.
Okay, I'm going to do a short vernacular. You're all very welcome. You don't have to belong to the movement. We've got a lot of Beitar people there as well. I must just stress this because Beitar, it's all one thing anyway, and there's a close bond. Hilton Silverstein, I don't know if you guys remember him. He was very involved in Beitar. Today he lives in Israel. Anyway, in B'nai Akiva Shul, this is a shul where there are a lot of converts, tremendous amount of converts. And very interestingly, in Judaism, if you think about it, one of the greatest women in the history of Judaism, the great-grandmother of King David, was Ruth. Okay, and Ruth was a non-Jew, she was a Moabitess. And from her, because why did God choose her to be the symbol of greatness? Because of her midas, because of her attributes. She was such a good person that from her the Messiah is going to come. He has to come from the house of David, which is a direct descendant from the house of Ruth, from Ruth. So now, when you look at converts to Judaism, there are many converts, there are a tremendous amount of converts who actually converting to Judaism in Israel and here as well. We've met with Portuguese converts who just want to convert to Judaism. No one's ever said, they've just read and they've decided that it's the right thing for them. In Osamak in Israel, there's a minister from a church, from a Lutheran church. His name is Asher Wade. So he was very high up in the church, Lutheran church. He's German. His wife's German. And his father-in-law is a German priest. He looked into the Bible and he checked that it wasn't 100% and he wanted to know the truth. So he by himself decided to convert to Judaism. There's a guy from which you mentioned, Billy called Polemics, Shmuel Golden. He was in Manchester, he was in Manchester, he was all over the UK. But have you heard of Billy Graham? Yeah. Billy Graham came to his church. He was high up in the church, very high. And he realized that it wasn't for him to convert to Judaism. But the aim of Judaism isn't to convert everyone. That's not our aim. If people want to convert and they're sincere, they're very welcome. But we don't say that just because you're Jewish, you're going to go to Olam Haba or God's going to listen to you.
I think what I meant was, it seems that most of the people involved in Jews for Jesus are Jews that were converted to look at Judaism from a more Christian point of view. But there doesn't seem to be that many that were Christian originally and were converted to look at Christianity in a more Judaic point of view. And I mean, was there any reason why it's more the Jews that are attracted to believing in the Messiah than Christians believe in
okay, so if you saw from the beginning, last question, if you saw from the beginning of the tape, who actually funds the Jews for Judaism? The Jews for Jesus?
No, the Church.
How did they come to
Church of England.
The Church of England, the churches here, and they just underhand. We actually should show you here that I don't know if you've got time, we'll maybe make it in Joburg another time. Lester Bloomberg, they had him on Monday night. I met with him in Pretoria. So, Rema Church got hold of this guy Lester. He was an advocate, very high, he was a businessman of the year. They showed him the New Testament, he converted to Christianity, and it's become like a cult. People have left their homes, they've left their families, and they've been following this guy Lester Bloomberg. And I was in Switzerland. It was on agenda. I met with him. I saw him in Bataclan many years ago, and he comes across very friendly, but very, very dangerous. But who got him involved in the beginning? And what's the final thing is people, a lot of the Jews for Jesus, they become Jews for Jesus because say they marry out the faith or that, and then they feel guilty about it. So nice way they become, say, I can still be Jewish, but I believe in Jesus. But it doesn't work.